This is what makes music suspenseful. Did you guess the music? Well done if you did, because it wasn't easy, but for different reasons from the previous video. The chords are really quite generic, something you've heard in countless movies, but the moment you add the melody back in, it immediately becomes obvious where the music comes from, unless you've been living under a rock. But what truly makes music suspenseful? Spoiler alert, is not about the chords or orchestration even, is a bit more complex than that. Let's look at the definition of suspense. Suspense is a state of uncertainty, anticipation, and tension, often achieved by delaying the resolution of an event, situation, or outcome, with the effect of keeping the audience in a heightened state of curiosity and excitement. So it's quite a vague feeling, and while we often associate it with genres like horror or thriller, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Any story has suspense, regardless of the genre, and it's not a term that should be associated with negative emotions or even a specific emotion per se. This also applies to music. The example we just played creates anticipation and uncertainty, but it also exists on a spectrum. What do I mean by that? What do I mean? It means that there are various degrees of suspense, and if we go too far in one direction or the other, the music can either become just, plain unpleasant or too vanilla, losing its suspenseful quality altogether. So you can see how you can season different genres with a bit of tension as a mean of storytelling. How do you do that though? Let's take a look at some examples. And by the way, the mockups you see in the video are available for download on my Patreon. A big part of how this music is now associated with themes of power, temptation, human struggles, or even battle between good and evil, is due to the huge success of the movie and the place it has taken into pop culture. So context is key, yes, but there are a few things that harmony and orchestration do very well to evoke this feeling. For example, we have the use of minor chords moving in half-step motion and the progression starting on the flat second. This gives it a good degree of tension by nature of not starting on the tonic. But what I find really brilliant is how the melody is designed with the chords. I think it's super cool how the theme initially begins on the flattened fifth of F minor, and upon repetition it transitions to a simpler variation starting on the second of A flat minor. The shape and intervals of the melody, as well as the progression, are almost exactly the same, but by displacing the start of the melody, we almost get two different shades of it. In other words, the dramatic arc of this composition is made by ups and downs, with moments of tension alternated with resolution, purely with the use of melody and harmony. This creates great suspense, particularly when coupled with lonely violins in a higher than necessary register, giving the music a cold, eerie quality. After repeating the theme, violins move to a lower, more comfortable register, releasing some tension alongside the harmony. The rest of the orchestration really consists in, lower strings with the addition of brass and woodwinds to not only provide harmonic support, but also heaviness and seriousness to the arrangement. Remember though, there are different degrees of suspense, so I want to show you something on the lower end of the scale and some of the similarities with the music we just talked about. This is one of the more normal cues from the movie. It has a romantic, melancholic quality, yet it's not the usual neutral character theme you find in every movie. Once again, context is important. This theme plays mostly at the beginning of the movie, and it reflects the character's internal conflict and unfulfilled desires, giving it an aura of mystique and intrigue. This is mirrored in the music by being quite chromatic in nature, missing a defined key center, and in the repeated descending melody that never feels resolved. Now, if we compare the two cues side to side, we can observe some very obvious similarities when it comes to the orchestration and the overall shape of the composition as well. Obviously, both use strings primarily. They both start rather high and then gradually move lower in register, and they both alternate tension chord with its resolution. The main difference between the two cues is in the harmonic language. Marion's theme is not as dark, but is more ambiguous, featuring very unconventional chords and progressions that create a subtle sense of unresolved tension. With its meandering harmony, they lack a clear tonal center. The One Ring theme, on the other hand, creates suspension in a more conventional way, using minor chords, dissonance, and weight. They're equally effective in doing what they do, but you could never swap one with the other because they convey such different meanings. Before we move on to something else entirely, I want to show you a different cue from the same movie that I think sits nicely in between the two. I would probably rank this mid-intensity on the suspense scale, but I think it's very interesting how it features similar devices as well. First of all, the music is very slow, like the other two. It starts in a higher register and it progressively gets slower, and it alternates a tension chord with a resolution chord. I find this cue fascinating in its simplicity and how it shows that you don't need much in order to create an atmosphere, just, some sordino strings, diminished harmony, and the use of register, really. Couple that with something as mundane and ordinary as, pictures of a city in the first act of the movie, and you create great anticipation of what's to come without making the music overly dramatic or stylized. Alright, enough of Psycho. Let's take a look at something completely different. Apparently I can't go a video without talking about John Williams, so it's a sickness, really. So let's discuss the immolation scene from Revenge of the Sith. This cue just takes suspense to another level, but in a different way from the previous examples. The emotional intensity of the music is carried and amplified by the themes of loss and betrayal, making the audience at the edge of their seats as they witness Anakin's descent into darkness and his transformation into Darth Vader. To fully appreciate this, you should carefully study how Williams builds tension throughout the whole scene. The music really goes hand in hand with it, with a perfect balance of tension and resolution that goes with the picture in such a masterful way. Similarly to the previous cues, we have a string arrangement here as well, but it progressively gets higher and higher in register to build up intensity. This has the effect of making the music very dramatic and intense, something that may not have worked as well for the previous pieces. The harmonic language is quite different as well, and I'm gonna be oversimplifying a bit, but it's mostly, simple diatonic harmony sprinkled with a bit of dissonance on the more tense moments. I also want to draw your attention to the frequent use of modulation, and this is just, to add intensity and keep it captivating for the listener. If you want to listen to something with a similar kind of attitude, you should check out the patricide scene from the Gladiator as well. I won't go into too much detail as I haven't made a mock-up for this one, but it's basically the same idea. It explores similar themes of loss and betrayal, and it has a similar kind of vibe. While the immolation scene focuses more on Anakin's transformation though, this patricide scene emphasizes the themes of betrayal, power struggle, and moral decay. What both scenes do though is creating suspense through the emotional intensity of the characters' choices and the irreversible consequences of their actions. Musically, they sound similar because they obviously both use strings, they have similar kind of harmony, and they both develop tension alongside the visuals, like we said. So in short, what makes music suspenseful? And please bear in mind that this is not meant to draw the full picture, First and foremost, the context. Without these amazing movies, the music wouldn't resonate with the audience quite the same way that it does now. Tension and resolution. With all the examples, we had a good degree of dissonance and consonance for each passing chord, and most of them were in minor keys as well. Strings, and this is just to state the obvious, but basically all pieces of music had strings. This doesn't mean that you can't use other instruments, of course, but strings do have the power to carry, strong, powerful, emotional statements. Pace, and once again, this may be self-explanatory and quite obvious. Every piece was pretty slow. And finally, shape. Pretty much every piece had a very clear pattern, either descending or ascending, to build up intensity. Remember though, there are different degrees of suspense, and it's up to you how much you want to inject your music with it. It will be fascinating to explore other genres we haven't looked at today, and see how they could be approached with the same mindset of creating suspense. I have a video right here, in fact, what makes music fly, that could be a great example. You should check it out, by the way, if you haven't already, if you want to learn more about that. It's one of my favorites, I think. Come on, do it quickly. Click before it goes away. Did you do it?